The first is that you have data system naming that is being used as a definition name, right? So if someone says, I have, invoice ID and you have invoice ID and we don't agree on that, well, the reality is that, there's two different data systems and they both have invoice ID and they're slightly different, and you can't really change the name in the data system. Like, that's what it is, right? But if they are not the identical thing, they should require two different business glossary entries, right? Because it's different. These are different contexts, there's different stuff. So don't conflate the data system naming with the business glossary naming, right? So you can have something that's called, your invoice reference number, which in one case is stored in invoice ID, and you're actually like, an invoice ID that's an underlying, just one-up number for that data system that's not used for anything in another system. And those obviously have two different definitions, and the reference number ID get pulled in. So status is another one, so that you might have a field that's called customer status, and in some cases it really could represent some sort of like database status, or like last updated on or something. And the other one could really, in another case, it could really reflect like, oh, they're active, or they're engaged, or they're, like purchased something within the last 30 days, or whatever that might be. So just, you need to be, that's one of the common points of confusion is worrying too much about your particular, one particular data system's naming and how it might conflict with another particular data system's naming or a business glossary naming. They don't have to be the same. Data systems can have the same names, but the glossary cannot. Right. The next type of collision is a common name used with different valid contexts, right? So FTE is a common one in the higher ed space. So that typically means full-time equivalent, and for students, right? So what is our FTE? Meaning our total enrollment, or full-time enrollment is sometimes what they call that, or full-time employee. Like, it means a lot of things just from an acronym standpoint. But even if you're just looking at it in terms of your full-time enrollment, there's different methods of calculating that. The federal government calculates it this way, based on number of credits, and how do and the state might do it differently, and you yourself might do it differently within your own organization. So that is a common term, and when you're talking about it and reporting it, people are probably throwing around the term FTE all the time without defining the context of it, right? So the critical thing there is that the context is necessary to resolve that, and we'll talk about that. Department is another one that often causes confusion. Are you talking about a sort of a HR department, or are you talking about an academic department or a department in your store or whatever it might be? So most of the times that these are not, you might have heard me ever say this, if this is a common thing I say before in other webinars and discussions, is that we oftentimes will have customers, particularly higher ed customers, example here again, who come and say, we have 9 different definitions for student, and that's a problem. And my response to them is almost always, I agree that you have a problem there, but the problem is not that you have 9 different definitions of student. The fact is that you have 9 different things that you're calling student. And all 9 of those things likely have relevant, important context for being counted and measured, right? And you just don't know how to differentiate them because you're using the same word for all of them. So you're having a common name that you're using with different valid contexts. So you have to be able to refer to those things within their context. So the last one is legitimate disagreement about definition. So, we're not arguing about something that's different context. It's just that we don't, we don't agree what an active student is. Like, is it really someone who has this or this or this, or is it, someone who, what if they're in this other condition, and did we need to have that applied here, right? Maybe that puts them in a different context, but still, like we just don't agree on what that particular measure should be. Customer engagement is a really good one. That sometimes people are saying, like, how do we measure how engaged this person is? In higher ed, that's an incredibly important question people are asking right now, because everybody's remote. And how do you measure student engagement in your online classes? And how do you even get a valid count on that? And how do you determine what that means? So there's good reason to, to have disagreement and to come up with some resolution on what that definition is, right? So that's another valid point of collision.